I found our next storyteller in the kitchen. We once shared a house together, and I had the opportunity of living with him and his family. And I'd come into the kitchen to make some food, and there he'd be. One hand, stirring dinner. The other hand, washing dishes. And telling the longest, most epic Big Bird story that you'd ever heard. And his sons flapping and laughing all over the living room. He's a dear friend and an amazing father. Please welcome Ocean Robbins.
Food's kind of a big deal in my family. I love food. I love healthy food. I love real food. I love food that's prepared and eaten in ways that are in alignment with our integrity and our values and our dreams for our lives and our planet. And my family's passion about food goes back some generations. My grandfather founded an ice cream company. It was called Robbins. My dad grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer at all times. He was groomed from early childhood to one day join in running the family company. But when he was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance, and he said no. And he walked away from a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream to follow his own rocky road. He had met my mom in Berkeley in the 60s and had decided that his life was about something other than selling ice cream. So they ended up moving to a little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, lived very simply, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. That's me. They almost named me Kale. I'm glad they chose something more normal. But we did eat a lot of kale, along with cabbage and carrots and onions and chard and other vegetables they grew in the garden, along with buckwheat and legumes. And once in a blue moon, for a very special treat, we'd have some organic blackstrap molasses. I think we went through about a bottle a year. Once in a great while, we had some carob food, some carob cake. In those days, we thought carob was healthier than chocolate. I don't know what was up with us. Anyway, so I actually grew up functionally vegan, although we didn't really know the word at the time because it wasn't widely used. And I was not only an only child, but I was pretty much the only child around. We were in the middle of the woods, and social life was basically interacting with my parents. Then when I was 5, we moved to Vancouver Island, where there was a city and a school to go to and other kids to play with. And that's when I was first exposed to other people who ate differently than I did. It was also when I first started to develop social skills. Now, keep in mind here that my parents were pretty passionate about healthy food. My dad had walked away from the ice cream company, and he knew a lot about the realities of chemicals and additives and sugar and the dairy industry and the way that animals are being treated in factory farms, and he knew it from firsthand experience. And he always believed that one of his values was to really level with me and tell me the truth about what he thought and felt and believed. So I was probably one of the most aware of the horrors of factory farms 4-year-olds on the planet. So I get to school, and I watch my friends opening up their Cabbage Patch Kids and Star Wars lunch boxes, and to me they look like coffins. And I see Susie opening up her turkey turnover, and I say, do you realize that turkey was probably clucking around, breathing the same air that we do just a few days ago? And she looks at me and moves a little further away. And then I go over to Jamie, who's eating his roast beef sandwich, and I say, do you believe in the death penalty for murder? It didn't go well. By the end of that interaction, his roast beef sandwich was thrown by me in the garbage. We had a fist fight, and we ended up in detention in the principal's office. Here's this kid who's passionate about nonviolence towards all beings getting in fist fights over what other kids are eating. It might seem ironic, indeed it was, but I was of the belief that when you believe in something, then your job is to stand up for it. And I was of the belief that it was something I held deeply, that compassion towards all beings was something I believed in. And so I was trying to find a way to stand up for my values at the age of 5, in a context that often a lot of people didn't think the way I did. And deep inside, I felt lonely. And as the years went by, that loneliness grew. I remember when I was about 8 being over for dinner at my friend Seth's house. And his parents had made me some rice and vegetables while they were eating hot dogs. And I think trying to be polite, they asked me, "How long have you been vegetarian?" And I responded, "My whole life. I've never once eaten the slaughtered carcass of a dead animal." I thought they would celebrate my accomplishment. But the nervousness and the awkwardness in that room was palpable. I could see Seth looking at his hot dog and feeling very awkward. I was never invited over for dinner again. I can't imagine why. Well, as the years went by, I think my dad was starting to get concerned about me. Because the truth is that while I was passionate about my convictions, I also felt often like an alien. I didn't have a lot of close friends. I felt like I was the only person my age who thought the way I did, and I was probably right. There was one other vegetarian in the school, and she was 3 years younger than me, and we didn't get along at all. And while on the outside, I was conveying a fairly militant and aggressive stance. In fact, I would go through the school sometimes shouting, "I don't want my body to be a graveyard," and telling my friends that I didn't eat my friends, which was good for them and for the animals in my life. Asking my friends if they would like it if I ate their dog for dinner. While on the outside I was fairly aggressive and had a lot of sharp one-liners, on the inside I felt estranged, I felt lonely, I felt disconnected from the people around me. One day my dad sat down with me. He said, "Do you think it's possible that maybe you could be more effective as an advocate for compassion if you showed some?" He said, "Do you think it's possible that judging people and making them feel defensive isn't helpful to your social life?" I said, "You know what? I believe in what I believe in, and quite honestly, I don't care what other people think of me. I care about being true to my conscience." Well, he said, "You know what? I love you no matter what you eat, and I love you no matter what you do. And I want to invite you to just think about this some more." Well, I did, and I had made up my mind. When I was 10, I think my dad was even getting a little more concerned, and he reached out to me and he said, "You know what, I have actually a request to make. I'm your dad, and I've been around this earth more times than you have, and I've learned some things along the way. And it's my job as your dad to look out for you and to share with you some of what I've learned. And I have an invitation, which is actually a request." I didn't know what was coming next. I thought maybe he wanted me to join him in his daily yoga practice at the crack of dawn or sleep on a bed of nails, but actually it was worse than that. He wanted to take me out for a filet mignon. Now, he was a passionate vegetarian himself. This wasn't his lifestyle at all, but he loved his son enough to realize that something had to be done to help me feel a deeper bridge to the most of humanity for whom filet mignon was food. And so I was honestly pretty horrified, but I loved him and I trusted him. And so I went out for dinner with him. He took me to the finest restaurant in Victoria, on top of an 18-story building. The waiters were all in suits. And they brought me this filet mignon. And I look at it, and that's when I realized I had no idea how to eat it. I wouldn't break with a fork. He had to show me how to use a knife to cut off a piece. I cut off a piece, I put it in my mouth, I chewed it once or twice, and then I spat it out. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you satisfied?" And he said, "I love you no matter what you eat. I love you no matter what you do. And actually, I'd love to see you swallow." I paused for a long time at that moment. I felt like I was at some kind of turning point in my life. And I ended up taking a bite, and I swallowed it. I ate a bite of filet mignon. And it was a kind of turning point in my journey, and I'll tell you why. Because now I was no longer fiercely identified as somebody who had never eaten meat. And because in some way I was in some way connected to all the people around the world for whom this was a source of food. And because in some way the rigid lines between right and wrong, good and bad, black and white, dark and light, between righteous and that to be judged was starting to be softened. In some way, a seed was being planted in my being to explore what does it mean to be true to our values and our integrity and our passion in the way that is congruent with our interconnection with all of life and all of humanity. With people wheresoever they may be on the path and whatsoever values and aspirations they may hold and whatever physiology and psychology they may hold around food or anything else. Well, some years later, my dad became a best-selling author. He wrote books about food and health that inspired millions of people to look at their food choices as a chance to make a difference in the world. And some years later, beyond that, I wound up joining forces with him. And today we're working together for a food revolution. We're standing up for healthy, sustainable, humane, delicious food for everybody. And as I do that, as I seek to be true to a conscience and the values that says I don't want toxic food, I want a world where everybody can eat healthy, real food that's good for their bodies, that's aligned with their integrity, that helps our planet to have a fighting chance, and that's humane and compassionate towards all of life. I do so from a foundation of recognizing to the best of my abilities that humans are part of life, and that all people and all choices deserve to be listened to be respected, and to be loved. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "You have no moral authority with those who can feel your underlying contempt." Well, I explore that question on a regular basis, and that statement, and I ask, what does it mean to release contempt and to stand in the truth of who we are and what we believe? What does it mean to stand for something with boldness and courage, and let that stand be a source of compassion for all life?